All right, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders here for a little bit. Look, obviously, this season isn't going the way anyone in Raider Nation really hoped it would at this point. It's a disappointing season. Now, all eyes are trending towards the future and what's going to happen to fix the problems. And the Raiders leadership recently made, I think, a smart decision. Kind of flew under the radar, but I think it's a key step here to try and fix some problems and get the team leadership, the players, back on board to get things headed in the right direction. I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, like I mentioned in the opening, this Raiders season hasn't gone anywhere nearly as well as some of us had hoped for. This was a talented team coming into the season. There's been some bright spots, of course, some young guys stepping up, but overall the record and the performance has not been what's needed to be. And over the bye, the Raiders made, I think, a smart decision. The leadership did to help address some of that. Let's pull up this report here, courtesy of CBS Sports. The 2-7 Las Vegas Raiders are enjoying a much-needed bye week after 5 straight losses, but the team didn't go quietly into its time off. Sources tell CBS Sports that several Raiders players, including team captain Max Crosby, spoke openly in a players and staff meeting. I think that's important. Monday, addressing what they viewed as inefficiencies and deficiencies within the organization on a week-to-week basis. The hope for everyone involved is that the talks result in some positive change for the Raiders in the second half of the season. Head coach Antonio Pierce fired 3 offensive coaches Sunday night, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware at this point, after the Raiders lost to Cincinnati. Getsy, their offensive coordinator, James Craig, their offensive line coach, and quarterbacks coach Rich Scangarello were all relieved of their duties, and of course they brought in a couple turners there to kind of fill the gap in the short term as well. But I want to talk about this leadership meeting in terms of the staff meeting, getting everyone on board. I think it's a smart decision by the Raiders, and I'll go into in a second why. But first, Raiders fans in the comment section below, obviously at this point in the season not going the way a lot of you hoped, but give us your one bright spot. There's got to be one bright spot. Personally, for me, it's Brock Bowers. This dude can play football at an incredibly high level. He'll be a weapon for many years to come in the silver and black. But give us your bright spot. Is it Bowers? Is it something else? Let us know in the comment section. But first, before we dig into this, I'm sure regular viewers of this channel understand that usually there's two of us, I should say, me and my co-host. He's not here, can't make it, had some family stuff come up. So forgive me if the production quality is a step lower than it normally is. But talking about this decision here by the Raiders, I think it's important because if you go back a year, the Raiders had a very similar kind of deal with Josh McDaniels that ended up leading to McDaniels firing, right? The leadership brought in the players and said, hey, what's wrong? And they basically said, Josh McDaniels stinks. He's a terrible coach. He's a terrible leader. We need to fix this problem. And the leadership, the Raiders, Mark Davis, listened to him and said, yeah, I agree with you. Got rid of McDaniels. They brought in Antonio Pierce, and obviously things haven't improved completely yet. But I love the fact that they're willing to have another meeting. They're willing to at least hear the players out and make the changes. I've worked in corporate America a number of times in my life, and one thing that always frustrated me is that every time we'd go through a big leadership change, we'd have a new president and CEO, we'd bring on the board and some new general manager or something like that at the facility where I was working, and nothing would really change. We'd have like those all hands meetings where we'd be like, hey, I want to hear you guys out. How are we going to make some changes? Whenever the new guy showed up, and then nothing would change, and then a couple of years would go by, and they fire the top guy and then replace him with somebody else, right? I always thought that was stupid. I thought, listen, you listened to the employees the first time to try and figure out what was wrong, and you made some changes, and then you stopped listening to them, right? And you look at guys like Max Crosby. This dude's a winner. He's one of the best football players in the NFL. He's one of the top 15, 20, not defensive ends, not defensive players, but downright players, period, in the National Football League. There's a lot of quality guys on this Raiders roster, guys that are going to be great pieces for the future. Listen to some of these guys. These guys have ideas. They know how to win. Listen to your employees. This is a message that corporate America has figured out the hard way. You look at formerly great companies like Boeing. Instead of focusing and listening to their employees, their engineers and manufacturers, how we can build better planes, the guys at the top are just counting the beans, trying to make Wall Street happy. We've seen how far that company has fallen. The Raiders, to their credit, understand that they've got to listen to their guys. They've got to listen to their star players, even if it's tough, even if it's uncomfortable. That's why you make firings in the middle of the season, because you've got to solve as many problems as you can. The reality is, Josh McDaniels, as bad as he was, he's not the Raiders' only problem. The Raiders have had problems off and on for the better part of the last 22 years, right? It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. There's been a couple good hires. I still like the Antonio Pierce hire. They made a lot of solid draft picks. I think Brock Bowers is a stud. I'm really excited to see how JPJ develops. I think Malcolm Kuntz is going to be a superstar in this league when he comes back from injury. There's a lot of of pieces I really like on this Raiders squad. But the reality is they have not stepped up yet, living up to that talent. I think they made some good changes, but I think listening to the players, listening to the employees could provide the fuel they need to fix a lot of these problems. And I give them a lot of credit for doing it. There's a lot of teams, and frankly, most teams don't do it. The coaches just sit there and say, listen, I'm the guy in charge. You're going to do what I say. And eventually that coach gets fired if they don't win. And then the next coach comes in and he says, I'm the guy in charge and you're going to do what I say. The reality is with the Raiders, it's going to take a large cultural shift. That's going to take months and years and an iterative process. You're going to have to hire some people, fire some people, cut some players, trade some players. It's going to take time. But I love the fact that the leadership is willing to and really dedicated to listening to the guys that really know what it takes, like Max Crosby, the guy on your screen there. If you listen to what Crosby says and you implement over a long enough timeline, you will be successful. And Raider Nation, I know you guys are frustrated, but I think if you just stick with this patience, and I know it's been so much patience for so long, but I really think there's some moves made at the top of the organization that should push this team in the right direction.